Hey, let me tell you a story about a friend of mine who's an atheist, and we've been friends for about 10 years, and we, as you might imagine, talk about a lot of things: God, life, spirituality. And one day we were talking about Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers, and it turns out this atheist friend of mine, he doesn't believe in God. And he thinks Christians generally are probably, phonies and things like that. But we were talking about Mr. Rogers, and he said, you like Fred Rogers? I said, oh, yeah. I mean, I really love the guy. I've respected him for such a long time. In fact, Mr. Rogers said one of my very favorite quotes, and I've read about him, I've studied him. But Fred Rogers said, there's nobody you couldn't love if you only heard their story. And that kind of a sentiment touches people. So my atheist friend was talking to me, and he said, you know what I love about Fred Rogers? He seems to just love people unconditionally. He seems just to be so empathetic. He seems to be somebody you could totally trust. He seems to be somebody that, would forgive you no matter what happened. And he would never bail out on you. He would just always be there for you. And so I asked my atheist friend, I said, why do you think you like those qualities in Fred Rogers? Unconditional love, just consistent forgiveness, dependability would be there for you. And he said, I don't know. That's just the ultimate character that we would want to see in anybody. And I said, I think the reason that you are so enamored with the personality of Mr. Rogers is because what we call that's Christ-likeness. And Mr. Rogers, as is well known, was studying to be a Christian minister, and I really think his show was a kind of ministry. But do you know what? In the Bible, it talks about being transformed and being changed. In verses like Romans 8:29 and in 2 Corinthians chapter 3, it talks about the life of the believer being connected to God, and it uses a couple of words. In Romans 8, it really uses a form of the word symmetrical. That if you're a believer, you've got the very nature of Christ in you, and your life and your actions should be that way as well. In 2 Corinthians chapter 13, it talks about being transformed. So a part of what our life is to be and what our life can be, when you have Christ in your life, your inner reality can match your outward behavior. One of the great frustrations in life is that we know what we ought to do, we just can't do it. We know what we ought to do, and we don't. Paul talks about it in Romans. He says, I'm a wretch. I want to do this, but I don't. And I don't want to do this other thing, and I do. What's going to change me? And do you know what? The good news is the power for our life to be changed is available. And when that is operative in our life, when what we believe and who we are is consistently manifested, there's joy, there's peace, there's purpose, there's fulfillment, but it's also something that's very noticeable to the rest of the world. Do you know Thomas Edison? I'm very interested in Thomas Edison. He was trying to invent what came to be known as the incandescent light bulb, and he spent over 1,000 attempts trying to find the right kind of filament. And he was getting older, and some of his assistants actually made fun behind his back and mocked him, and they thought it was just something he would never succeed. And finally, he came up with this tungsten filament, and we have the incandescent bulb, although nowadays so many bulbs are LED. But at any rate, it took a lot of tries, but he found the thing that connected, and the light shined forth. You might have tried 1,000 failed attempts at finding meaning, purpose, and fulfillment. You might have knocked on a lot of doors that you opened and the room turned out to be empty. That thing, more than a filament, a relationship, that thing that will light you up, fill you inside, and be a shining beacon for the world to see, it's Jesus Christ who loves you and so operative in so many lives, and he can be operative in your life as well.